Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we have a very special guest on the podcast who is a mentor of mine and someone that I talk to on a frequent basis as it relates to leadership and running a successful company. And as we always talk about on the podcast, growing our people. Without any further ado, would like to introduce the president of Anthony's Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electric, Kent Gurske. Welcome to the podcast, Kent.
Thanks, Chad. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on here.
Awesome. Well, I know you have a ton of knowledge, and we'll jump into some of the stuff that I think is really unique that you do with your team there that we have shamelessly stolen from you and now do in our organization, and just the way you're affecting the lives of those on your team. I guess to start out, why don't you give us a little bit of background and maybe how you got into the trades and kind of where you are today.
Okay. I was fortunate enough, so grew up from the Midwest, but grew up in Southern California. And at 18 years old, really didn't have a lot of, I was going to community college and didn't really have much of anything as far as work ethic or a plan or direction. And was fortunate enough to meet a young woman that I started dating and ended up marrying, whose father had a plumbing company. So I began working with him part-time while I was going to community college and having a weekday job. And I never really set out to be a plumber or work with my hands. But he kind of took me under his wing and began teaching me a trade. After a while, I began to really like the trade, and I liked the idea of, I liked the sense of completion. I liked problem solving. And I certainly liked the industry as far as the potential to provide for my family. And so began working for him full time. And at the age of 25 in Fullerton, California, started my own little company. And certainly not equipped to run a company in any way. I was fortunate enough to have two wonderful plumbers. One was my brother-in-law, and another one was just phenomenal. There were no maintenance required, zero leadership. And we had a nice little company. Didn't know a lot about the business, kind of lived month to month, and just really was a technician owner. We, after a few years, about 13 years later, I convinced my wife and my in-laws to move back to Kansas, and I started another small company from scratch, which I would never do again. And struggled, had some ups and downs, and then was blessed enough to meet a gentleman named Steve Burbridge. Walked over to my booth at a home show in Kansas City, which is where we're located, and we struck up a friendship. And about 11 years ago, he asked me to come in and run their plumbing department, which was at the time was a fairly small company and certainly a small department. Found out very quickly what leadership was, and that I was not prepared for it. So began the plumbing department, ran that for 9 months, and then his partner retired and went into teaching, and they made me the operations manager. Certainly not prepared for that. That would be 9 years ago, and I'm sure we'll get into it. A long, bumpy path of growth and development that has certainly changed my life for the better. Over the last 9 years, we were 52 employees when I came to Anthony, and now we're at about almost 240. So that's the path to where I am now.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot to unpack there as it relates to your story. One of the things, and I guess I asked this question as knowing you today, we've known each other for about a year or so. What would you say are some of those things that you mentioned a couple of times in there that, I wasn't ready for it or, wasn't prepared to take on the challenges of leadership? What were those things, if you look back on those early days, starting your own company is no small feat. What are some of those things that you may have been doing in those early days that you didn't realize were leadership type principles back then that you didn't even know about, but that you look back on now like, hey, yeah, that's a really good tenet of leadership?
I think in praise, so being positive early on, again, didn't really consider myself a leader, but just always supportive, always positive. I think I get that from my father. As far as the 2 or 3 employees that we had as a small company, I just very positive and upbeat. I think was what I was doing back then that certainly translated over to the position I have now.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing for all leaders is to show you care. It seems simple, yet sometimes in the day to day, and especially in an industry like ours, where emergency service, if the customer calls, we come a running, and it's easy to forget that care and compassion that's needed to lead others into situations, circumstances that are not the best. The customer's in a bad spot, and it may be late, maybe early, whatever it is, we're there to take care of the customer. What were maybe some of those things that you were most surprised about, that, early on you didn't recognize, but as you continued on your leadership journey, that you found like, oh, wow, I would have never in a million years thought that would be something that would be critical to leading others?
Listen, well, I mean, there's so many things. First of all, really the ability and the understanding of how to listen to people. I think I was extreme. My wife might tell you still not a great listener, but really the importance of listening or reflective or active listening, and the engagement and how that impacts people when you do it well and when you don't do it well. I would say really learning how to listen first and foremost, and then really understanding the need as a leader or someone that is aspiring to be a leader is that you have to commit to grow it. You have to be intentional. So the law of intentionality with Maxwell, you have to be intentional about growing every day, and it never stops. Being a technician and coming into an office setting or a leadership setting, I think the first thing, at least I thought of, was that I've arrived. Hey, I've got my dream job, when really it's just you're using the other side of your brain, skills that you haven't acquired or mastered yet, and you've got to grow. You have got to commit to growing at a daily intentional rate, or it can be a very difficult job coming in as a technician into leadership. And I didn't recognize that in any way at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that from what my perspective of what I've seen is a lot of times we have to ask the right questions and be there to listen, because those we're leading may have had a bad experience in the past where they weren't listened to, or wherever it is, there was a gap there where they are somewhat reticent to even share their feelings or where they are or their frustrations or the hurdles that they may be trying to overcome. What would you say? Do you try to? What are a couple of key takeaways that a listener might be able to utilize as it relates to listening or improving one's listening skills? Maybe some techniques that you use or try to teach to your people who are managing others.
I'm writing it down. So because I'm not a listener and I don't have a very good attention span, you'll find that I always have a notebook with me, or if I'm leading a meeting with a group of people, I'm at the whiteboard writing, and I make it very clear to them, I'm writing this down for me. This has nothing to do with you. And I think the most important part of listening or a conversation is the follow-up, is sending that email out to a leader or a technician or anybody you're having a conversation with to say, here's what we talked about. Here's my action plan. Here's your action plan. And basically what I'm telling that person is, I heard what you said. What you said matters to me.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a gentleman who is a field supervisor currently for us, and we have an open role as a manager, and he's interested, and he asked me, like what's the main responsibility of this job? And I said that exact same thing to him. I said the main responsibility is to follow up with people. Is if someone asks you for something, let them know, even if it's not accomplished. Hey, I heard you. I'm working on this. Hey, I've asked some people. I'm waiting on a response. Keep them updated. Keep them in the loop. That's maybe 3/4 of the battle. And I think it relates back to that, to that listening piece of, I heard you, I know it's important, even if it's small. You as a leader can make a ton of headway by just simply following through with what people are asking you to do. Where do you see there, as it relates to, the law of intentionality? We're both huge Maxwell fans. Where do you see there to be some area where people could take advantage of, as it relates to kind of that intentionality and growing every day? Because I couldn't agree with you more. But where do you see, maybe from a personal perspective, or from those that are on your team, where they're using that law of intentionality to really push forward?
That's part of our leadership university is the 15 laws of growth. And we start with the law of intentionality. And the point of that is to understand each person going through that class creates a personal development plan. And I really tell them this is really where it starts. The growth doesn't happen in this class. This growth happens, number one, with a written plan, but also that you've got to find someone else to help you. Human nature says that it's our completion rate is going to be pretty low if we're relying on just ourselves with our busy lives. And one of the things we do in that class is we split the class up in half, and they create a small group. And when they come into class every week, the first thing they do is go over their PDP, we call personal development plan, or PDP, together, and talk to each other and hold each other accountable and talk about where they're struggling. And so if you're going to be intentional, you'll always hear me say it takes a village to grow a leader. You're going to have to include others and be vulnerable enough to do that.
Absolutely. I love that idea. Tell us, the audience, a little bit more about, because this is super unique, especially in the trades, about your leadership program that you have there at Anthony's.
We just kicked it off a few months ago as far as a formal training program, but it is a program. It's a 2.5-year program designed to take someone from technician all the way to GM, if they want to run their own branch of Anthony, or hopefully someday take my job, my position. And I think a lot of it's based on a lot of the mistakes that I made, but also, again, I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of other really good leaders and other good companies, such as yourself, to see what they're doing. And we took a lot of the best ideas to equip them to lead. And 1.0 just starts with the ideal team player by Patrick Lencioni, understanding the virtues that we hold that really make up our core values, and then crucial conversations on how to have a good conversation, because leadership is persuasion, and you need to be able to communicate and listen and understand what you bring to that conversation, both the positives and the negatives. So we've just begun that, and we're really excited about it. It's been great so far.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we do something similar, and I think we've talked about this, but we always came from the perspective of, you got a lot of people who want to take that next step, they just don't know where to start. And so I think what you're doing is extremely commendable, as far as giving people a roadmap. We're always, hey, growth, you can grow, be intentional, all of this. And some who may have not been, whatever, just exposed to that type of stuff, often find themselves, kind of lost, like, hey, yeah, I'd love to do this. I'm super passionate about it, but where do I begin? So I think that's fantastic. And it obviously shows in your guys's success there. What would you say, if you're listening out there and you're kind of in an individual contributor role, or in our industry it's a technician, or maybe a CSR dispatcher or something like that, where you're individual contributor, what are those couple of things that you see kind of your top performers doing, either within their position during their daily kind of work schedule, or outside of it? Obviously, attending the leadership university is one of those things, but what else do you see your top performers doing, that is moving them along in their kind of leadership journey?
The need to grow. So finding someone to talk to find out how to grow, either in their position or wanting a career path and going into leadership. So one of the people I've learned a lot from in this industry is a gentleman named Brandon Anderson. Is a company in Morris Jenkins in Charlotte, and his philosophy was always that if you're not growing, either as a technician, as a leader, as a call center rep, the company will always grow. And if you're not growing, the company will leave you behind. And so anybody that has that desire to grow with the company in any form or shape is going to lead to success. And they will get noticed really quickly in our organization.
Yeah.
So it could be just any type of book, any type of podcast. It's one of the things we ask in the monthly one-on-one meeting is, where are you growing? And what are you working on?
Absolutely. And I think that that is kind of the telltale sign of, are you really serious about this? You see on everybody's, annual review that they want to in 5 year, with their 5 year plan is to move up or to be a manager or to, be a senior technician or whatever it is. But, really where the rubber meets the road is taking action. And to move forward, we can't just work another year and expect to be closer to the goal. It's great that we set the goal, but now what's the plan on how we're going to get there? And I think kind of holding people accountable for that just produces tremendous results.
I don't want them to make the mistakes I made. I mean, I wish someone from day one when I went into leadership said, okay, you need to start growing. What are you
Yeah.
doing? What are you working on to grow as a leader? And I would have been like, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I don't want them to replicate all the mistakes I've made. So, or to regret to be a few years down the path and go, man, there's a lot more I'd like to do. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's tremendous, as far as, that willingness to help, that willingness to serve. Ultimately, that's what leadership's about. As it relates to growing leaders, so obviously you guys have placed a huge emphasis at Anthony's on growing leaders, providing them resources. What kind of impact do you think that has on your overall culture at the company?
I think so. As far as growing leaders, they become so. One thing I've watched in the leadership university is you have people from different departments growing together. So it breaks silos or prevents silos from happening. So they're getting a perspective of what other leaders go through or what other departments, especially when you're talking about field and support. So they're getting a better understanding of each other and what they go through each day. And I think that's some of the feedback. So by having them grow together and giving them the resources to do that, it certainly makes it a tighter knit organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing sometimes that gets overlooked is, you know, growing leaders. It's like, well, I don't know really where they have a path or anything like that. What impact would you say, obviously it's affected your culture, but growing leaders within your organization, how do you think that's contributed to the success and the growth that you've seen over, the last couple of years?
They're certainly engaged. We communicate better. The level of engagement, the level of accountability, or a level of self-awareness. I mean, how their words and how to listen and how to impact others. Pay and title just really only go so far. But I know Lencioni says that if people understand their role in the organization and how they impact it, then they'll run for a wall. They'll run through a wall for you. And they do. There's a greater calling when you equip them to be leaders and to equip them to serve others.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. As far as, I think when we grow people as leaders, we allow them to see their true why. Their why is not send the technician to the next call or answer the next phone call. That's very tough to do. Uh, it's when we try to see success out of that's their why, I think is where we struggle. It's when we unlock that. What are you doing personally? How are you growing as a person within your role? That's going to take you where you want to go. Do you have any particular stories that you'd like to share as it relates to someone in your organization who maybe came in at a particular, you don't have to give names if you don't want to, but someone who came in at a individual contributor role or just an apprentice or something like that that's kind of risen up through your organization into a leadership role? And if so, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of kind of how that story unfolded, and then kind of what you saw in that person that led to their success.
There's a lot, there's a lot of stories. I think the greatest, one of the things I'm most proud of is when you take technical. So I'm a technical person. So we do behavioral analytics, or we understand. We have a survey where we understand our natural behaviors, and when you can. So I have several stories of someone that might be successful as a technician that is very high technical but very low social ability, very so introverted. And when you can equip them and give them tools to learn and understand, and really that was my battle as a leader. When you give them tools to understand how their words, how an introverted person that's highly technical, that expects things to be perfect, and can be very critical, because that's gotten them that far and very successful. When you can watch that growth of how they use their words and how to listen and impact others, and watch them develop and almost just soften, become less critical and better listeners, and watch them impact and teach others to do the same. That's where I would say that's one of the things I'm most proud of as far as our success.
Yeah, I would say I've seen a lot of the similar items unfold here at our organization. Tell me a little bit more about, you mentioned the concept of people who want things to be perfect, and then watching them kind of transition into this imperfect world of leading people. Tell us a little bit about that transition and what that looks like.
That's yeah, that certainly was a battle for me. Mark Cuban says that the enemy of growth and profitability is perfection. And when you take technical people, whether i.e. a technician or call center, or someone that is very technical and very detailed, and you ask them to lead people and be okay with, and Gus Santos says done is better than perfect. It took me years to be able to say that with a straight face. That's one of the things I talk about early on in Leadership University, is your results now are based on the results of others, and they're not going to be perfect, and you're going to have to be okay with that. That's a big roadblock sometimes to overcome, and it takes a lot of listening. It takes, and as a leader, you've got to spend time with your people, invest in them, and understand their perspective, i.e. listen, to understand that maybe their way is okay. It doesn't always have to be my way. And that's where you start loosening that grip on perfection. And that can be take months. It could take years for some technical people to do that. But once they get there, it's very rewarding, from my perspective, and watching them grow as well.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I would say that that is probably the one thing that I see. I've really only been in this industry, but that I see people in our industry struggle with. And it's that need to be perfect, that need to follow the process A through G, whatever that looks like, and follow it step by step, when in all actuality, leadership is about developing people. It's not about holding them to a strict process and letting them do it. How do you encourage managers within your organization to really kind of break free of that and focus more on the individual, as opposed to, well, they're not following the process, so they don't know what they're doing? How do you encourage managers? What kind of conversations have you had with those that are on your team as it relates to that particular topic?
For us, it has to start with understanding your own natural behavior. So if the one thing I'd recommend for any leader or any organization, if you're not doing some type of test survey, whether it be DISC, we use Culture Index, There's several out there that are effective. If you don't understand your own natural behaviors first, it's pretty tough. And then that leads into understanding the natural behaviors of your team. And there's no right or wrong, there's no right fit, but understanding the why, how people process things, how people communicate and listen, that really is where you start. You know, my story really is, I didn't start growing as a leader until we hired this company and the consultant that came with it. I consider him a mentor, and he not only changed my professional life but personal life. And that was because when my profile came back, it basically said in a nutshell, you want it done your way, you're not going to communicate very well, you want it done right now, and you want it done perfect. And I looked at this survey and went, and I was really struggling as a leader, and my team was struggling because of me. I looked at this and said, that's who I am, but that's not my heart. That's not what I want. And that's not who I want to be. And Jason was the one that really kind of started me on that journey of, it can't be perfect, and you're going to have to learn to communicate and listen, or else you're going to have a hard time. And I was already having a hard time. So if you don't start with, obviously it always starts with us. If you don't understand your natural behaviors, it's going to be probably, in my view, it's going to be a little bumpier journey.
Yeah, I could not agree more. We use the DISC assessment here, and oftentimes when we have a personality conflict, we call it, between a manager and someone, we often tell them to take a trip down to our big DISC wall where we have a huge chart with everybody plotted on it, and everybody take a look at why is there a disagreement. And 9 times out of 10, you can pinpoint the break in communication due to the fact of someone wants it their way, someone else sees it a different way, and we've got to come in the middle. We've got to. Someone told me once in the DISC is, are you willing to bend towards those that you're leading, and understanding that you're going to have all types of personalities on your team. Yeah, you may have the person that thinks identical to you, does it like you, all of that stuff, but as a leader, we're called to lead many, not just ourselves, which I think is critical. I think that's interesting. And a point that may get overlooked in leadership is looking inward. It sounds like you've done a lot of self-reflection over the years as you've grown along your leadership journey. What impact would you say looking inward rather than outward has played in your leadership journey?
Leadership really is all about self-awareness, and certainly coming into leadership, my self-awareness was pretty low. I always say leadership's the greatest gift and the greatest curse, because you learn very quickly what you do well, but you learn very quickly what you do poorly, because your actions and words impact others. And certainly if you have any level of humility or servanthood, then it's going to be eye-opening for you. I mean, I can tell you in the last 5 years, I've changed so much as a person because, again, the self-awareness and understanding, being put into a position where you are in the spotlight and where people are depending on you, and your actions impact not just them, but their families as well. You do a lot of soul searching and introspection really quickly, or else it can be tough.
Yeah, it's very easy to point the finger outward when you're the quote unquote manager or the leader, and it's my way or the highway. Um,
That was me, definitely.
yeah.
There are stories. It's a lot. So there is old Kent and new Kent. There's a lot of stories around here, luckily old new Kent's been around for 4 or 5 years, but they do share the stories of old Kent with some new leaders, and they're always like, there's no way. And they're like, oh yeah. So this was micromanager, running around the hallways, so yeah, it can be very transformative, certainly. I think as technicians, I was in the field for 23 years. I liked fixing things. And so you go into leadership and your view is that I'm here to fix things. So let's get it done. Let's do this, do it this way. And that's that's great in the short term, but that certainly doesn't grow people and just creates some micromanagement culture that will at some point limit your growth.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that I've learned in leadership is people aren't going to change that much. You know, like your transformation is not one that I think would be maybe normal in that, you know, people are how they are. And there's probably, I would assume that you would probably say that you still are quite a bit like you were before. You're just more self-aware of what it is. It's not that you've changed as a person. You just are more aware of how you come off to people, how people react to your style, different things like that. And I think that's important in leadership as well, is knowing that someone who is a very, you know, uh, like a high I is what we call it in disc of, like they're not going to be great at details. So why are we putting them in a position or choosing to, mandate that they come with a detailed bullet list of objectives? It's not going to happen. So as leaders, understanding who they are, how they receive information, I think is extremely critical. And I appreciate you pointing that out. Um, I always say one of the things is I tell our leadership team is, I would highly doubt that anyone on your team showed up to screw anything up today. Like just came into work and said, I'm going to make your day a living hell
Yeah.
by doing literally everything wrong. It's more so, as you said, looking inward and saying, well, if they're doing something wrong, how can I support them so that they do it in the correct process? Or where's the disconnect in that communication and listening that kind of breaks through there? What are some of those things as far as the leaders on your team, and maybe more so those leaders? And I know we've talked about this, you've got kind of team leads set up that are kind of between the quote unquote department manager and then your frontline people. What are some of those qualities that you see in a good team lead, someone that's kind of on their leadership journey, but maybe leading more from the middle? So they don't have the final say, but they still do have some leadership responsibility. What are some of those qualities that you see in your really good ones? Do you think you could share with the audience?
Our culture is itself is built around the book, The Ideal Team Player. So hungry, humble, smart is what we hire for. Our hiring process is we say it's like a shape. So we're a triangle. We're looking for triangles to come and work for us. So it's the same with the field supervisor. As a technician bubbles up and is interested into leadership, the first class they go through is hungry, humble, smart, or is ideal team player. And they begin to understand those virtues. And it's watching them go through that and really understanding what Lencioni means by smart or self-aware or emotionally intelligent. What hungry is. It's not necessarily the most hours or the greatest revenue. It's from a team perspective, and then really what humility is and the impact of humility. That's for the most part what we're looking for. We are looking for the person that exudes those virtues more than anybody else, not necessarily the best technician or the best revenue producer.
Yeah, awesome. I want to dive into that a little bit, mainly because it's ironic. I was talking to a young guy who had reached out to me about some mentorship yesterday, and he's trying to grow his team and totally outside of our industry. But he's like, "Well, what could I do to?" And I go, "Well, someone taught me a long time ago, actually about a year ago. It was you, Kent. That in order to grow your people, you have to select the right person at the beginning." And I said, the biggest thing you could do is one, read the book that you just recommended, Ideal Team Player. But two, really get clear on who you are as an organization and what the people in your organization value. How do they act? How do they talk? What are they about? How important is it to select the right person with the right qualities?
It's everything. I mean, culture is culture is what drives our organization. When you we say HHS. When you find someone that's HHS, they're teachable, they're coachable, they'll adapt, they'll serve. So it really doesn't matter what role they're in. I mean, certainly technicians need to have, technical ability. They need to, know their trade, but um, you can look past any weaknesses and train those weaknesses if they hold those virtues. More importantly, they're committed to a team, so we just get stronger. And we use the culture index or the behaviors as well. Hungry, humble, smart always trumps that. So it took us a while to figure out. We used to hire based on the resume or their technical ability, and we realized, and again learned this a lot from Morris Jenkins, that you hire based on culture, and you'll find more success that way. And that certainly happened over the last few years for us.
100%. We've seen much of the same. If we can find the right people, the team becomes, it's almost like a compound effect, because you get them, you get their results, and then you get them helping other team members, and then their just willingness to grow. It sends whatever department they're in, and really the company in general, on a rocket ship of growth. Because when your people get better, well, the company's going to get better. And when you get better, you get bigger, and more opportunity comes, and so on and so forth. So as we kind of look to wrap up here, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, and definitely think that listeners out there, if you're on your own leadership journey and continuing on, you can take a ton of stuff, hopefully from this conversation, and implement it right in your business right now. What's that one thing, you've got a guy out there or a gal who, it seems like they're just beating their head against a wall, as it relates to growth and getting the right people on their team. What would you tell maybe that young Kent who's starting his own business? What would you tell that person, as it relates to leadership, that could really unlock some growth potential there for them?
Find a mentor. So it's like I said, it takes a village. Find 1, 2, 3 mentors. Find people that are doing it. Maxwell says bigger, faster, and better than you. And look to grow, look to emulate them, look to learn from them constantly. It wasn't until, again, I began 2016 where I went out and sought a mentor and really started to grow. I wish I would have done that from day one.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. One of the, I guess you kind of call it creepy tips I always talk about mentorship is the person who is mentoring you does not always need to know they're your mentor at first. And because more than likely, if they're, better than you are, they're probably busy. And what you can offer them is probably far less than you can gain from them. And so, you've mentioned Morris Jenkins a couple times. I'll tell my creepy story is that they've been my mentor far longer than they know. And you can, it's amazing what you can find on the Google, and follow everything they're doing and listen to everything that they're doing, and then try to emulate that. So, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to reach out and ask somebody, hey, will you be my mentor? And fear of rejection, different stuff like that. The way that I've always found is you can always provide value to someone, regardless of who they are. So if you read a book and think that they may benefit from it, send them a book. If you think that you read an article and they may benefit from it, send them something. Give. Finding a mentor is a lot like leadership. Look to serve, and they'll eventually, reciprocate, and people want to help those who are willing to help them or who find alignment with what they're doing. So I always throw that creepy tip in there. It's worked in the past for me. There's plenty of people out there that are continuing to be my mentors, but yet haven't officially, consummated that relationship there, between the two of us. So, I guess to finish up here, just as far as you go, And these are just kind of things that, obviously if you're learning and continuing to get better, what do you do? What's your morning routine look like as far as a leader? What gets you in the right frame of mind to go into the organization and be who you need to be for your people?
Well, at home, it's, before I climb out of bed, it's 3 gratitudes, time of prayer, drink a tall glass. So I have a tall glass of water that I drink on the drive in. Once I get into work, no electronics, and then I begin journaling. So I do a time of preparation and then a reflection as well. How did I do yesterday? What areas could have I improved? And then I spend some time in prayer as well here, praying for people in the organization, and just reflection that I'll act with humility and service throughout my day. Walk around the building, say good morning to everybody. This morning, obviously, it's almost feels like 100 degrees around here, so I'm out in the back parking lot. I'm thanking them for their hard work and their long hours. That's, for the most part, that's what my first hour to hour and a half looks like every day.
That's awesome. If you took anything from that, the amount of gratitude that you show before 9 a.m. Is remarkable. And if you're a leader out there or someone who is looking to grow into a leadership role, start immediately showing gratitude for those, even if they're not people that you lead. Just simply thanking them for helping you out or doing something, courageous or whatever it is. Appreciating those around you will make you a leader far faster than you ever thought. And I think that is a great tip to share and something for people to emulate 100%. All right, last question here, Kent. We made it through. What is your, right now as it relates to leadership or you growing, what's kind of your current obsession? Is there a podcast, a book, a practice? What is it that you're currently really liking as it relates to leadership?
Right now, my focus is learning to be a better trainer. So I'm in the last few months, I've been blessed enough to step away from the day-to-day operations. I have an amazing vice president of operations that's doing a phenomenal job. So right now, going back through the books that I'm teaching. So Ideal Team Player, I'm getting certified to teach Crucial Conversations. So I'm going back to our fundamentals and learning to be not a trainer, but a facilitator, which is really kind of the next step in my leadership journey and my role at this company. So I'm learning a lot about training and teaching right now.
That's awesome. That is I think if there's one thing that I've become more aware of is that I'm not a good trainer. It's a very, very interesting subject. I know Nexstar, which is an organization we're both a part of, has put a huge emphasis on, their class training mastery and different resources like that. But it all comes back to communication, right? And that is what we talked about at the outset of this, and what continued to be a common theme throughout is communication, self-awareness, and care, and really digging in to understand what your people need, how to communicate with them to understand what it is, and then how you can work with them to get better. Kent, I can't thank you enough. I know we talked about this, I think last week, and you were like, hey, what do you need me to do? And, always so gracious with your time and sharing what I think is one of my mentors, philosophy on leadership and kind of your journey. And hopefully, as I know you do every day when you go in, is impact someone out there that is on their leadership journey and looking to improve. This will hopefully be a great resource for them. So as we conclude, thank you again, Kent, for being part of the podcast. We're excited we'll be excited to share this here in a few weeks with people. As always, keep growing out there, keep getting better, keep learning. Every day is an opportunity to be a leader. Thank you. And until next time, we'll see you.